cities such as Chicago, St. Louis, St. Detroit, Houston, as well as in other countries such as Guyana and India. What touches so many about Romapada Swami is not just his vast knowledge of scripture, but the way he embodies it, with gentleness, humility, and empathy for each person he meets. Maharaja's words carry both clarity and warmth, reminding us that bhakti is not merely philosophy, but a living practice of love and service. We are very fortunate that he's taking the time to be at NIU today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to His Holiness, Sri Romapada Swami. I hope that by the end of today, through his words, we will all be a little bit more open, we'll all have a little bit more to think about and be more intentional with how we connect with one another and with how we engage in service. Thank you.
You didn't write that script, I should. I don't think I need a microphone. I think I'll just speak. Many years ago, I don't know, I have to stretch my memory to think how many, 25 years ago or something like that, I visited this university several times. And one of the things that's outstanding in my memory of visiting is I somehow met some students from Hyderabad. You from Hyderabad? Yeah. Okay. And the students I met from Hyderabad, they filled up 2 graduate student residential buildings. Is that still going on? Yes? So I asked, how'd that happen? They said, we're all friends. And a friend said, come on over. And so, they filled up 2 at that particular time. 2 buildings. Really large buildings, like giant big. So bring friends. Because your friends have brought their whole gathering of a group of people. This topic wasn't the topic I spoke about. I don't recall the topic I spoke about, but it was probably something in relation to Bhagavad Gita. One of the important messages in Bhagavad Gita. Am I safe to assume that you all have the modest acquaintance with Bhagavad Gita? I see one girl back here that you're from a different place than these other people are from.
No, I'm from Hyderabad.
You're from Hyderabad, up behind you. The quiet one back there. You know what Bhagavad Gita is? Now or then. Here's a little introduction, Bhagavad Gita introduction. It's a very ancient writing, and there's some very simple ways to describe what's in the book. And it's a book that describes yoga systems. It doesn't teach how to do hatha yoga and stretching exercise. It doesn't teach that. It describes the principles behind upon which that this and that. So it's a description of the yoga system. And it goes, starts here and then goes there and goes there, different names for different yoga systems. And then Bhagavad Gita describes, of the different yoga systems, one of them is the topmost. And the topmost is called Bhakti. B-H-A-K-T-I. Bhakti means service with love. That's like that sign that's up there, the Bhakti Meditation Club. So that's what we do. And Bhakti has 2 parts, what the mind does and what the body does. And both are important, what the body does and doesn't do, and what the mind does and doesn't do. If directed properly, it can lead to high consciousness. That's what yoga is intended to do. And higher consciousness of what? And then different stages, and ultimately higher consciousness of the Supreme, realization of the Supreme as a person. So with your body or senses, you serve the master of the senses. And with your mind, you bring your mind to a loving relationship with that person who you're serving with love. And that's Bhagavad Gita. Another way to describe what Bhagavad Gita is, it's a wisdom literature. All traditions, all cultures of the world, they have the wisdom literature. The Greeks had it. Western Europe has it. China has it. India has it. Wisdom literature. So what do wise people think about, feel, and write, and how do they live their life? What are the values that wisdom people like to live by and like others to catch hold of and do, take the benefit of? So it's another way of describing Bhagavad Gita as a wisdom literature. It's been around a long time. You're familiar with Bhagavad Gita? No. So, that's probably what I did some years ago when I visited Northern Illinois University and spent some time with the students living in that. It was all grad students, by the way. Those were the people that I was interacting with the film. So I probably spoke about Bhagavad Gita, and this is not about exactly Bhagavad Gita, but it's about Bhagavad Gita. The topic is addressing something that certainly young people today, but people today, young or old, have some issues with, some struggles with, and that is negative emotions. Just a little sharing in a informal way. Sometimes when I'm going to a place and they don't know me and I don't know them, they ask, can you give a suggestion, like a little, we can select from the menu some topic that you like to speak about. This is a very popular one. There's many different topics. But they like this one. So that's what this one is. Because meditation is a way of addressing, or even more than addressing, overcoming negative emotions. This little anecdotal piece. One time I was making this presentation in Kunming. There's nobody here from China, right? Where are you from?
I was born here.
You're born here? But where are your parents from? In China. You know where Kunming is, right? Yeah. So Kunming is one of the things, it's a large city, and it's the headquarters for China Eastern Airlines. China Eastern Airlines is like Delta, American Airlines, United Airlines. It's that kind of a level of the big airlines in China. And it's their headquarters. So I was making this presentation at a yoga studio in Kunming. Young people in China, they also have concern with negative emotions. So when we were going through this, the person who was the organizer pulled me to the side and said, just this morning, one of the executives in their 7-story building in Kunming, they jumped out of a window and splattered on the sidewalk. Suicide. And immediately the administrators of China Eastern, for all administrators, they had to participate in meditation training. This is a practice because they know, or statistically it's a known fact, that meditation helps overcoming negative emotions. I don't know what type of meditation, but it's just a principle. So the different practices of meditation that people do. But one of the things is your breath. It helps overcome negative emotions. Now, what are they? Where do they arise from, and how does meditation help bring them, a little bit more in control, negative emotions? And here's a little example. Here's one fellow. He made a plan to go for a walk by the seaside. He checked the weather report. The weather report said sunny day, good day to go for a walk on a boardwalk. When he got there, it started raining. Now, fortunately for him, there was a vendor at this end of the boardwalk, and he sold umbrellas, so he went to walk on the boardwalk with an umbrella. And sometimes life is like that. We have a plan, and then something happens and it doesn't match the plan, and it's a challenge. Yeah. And the nature of those challenges can be, there's a short list, there's more. Financial, relational, occupational, physical, social, cultural. And each of them can be pretty dramatic. And when that happens, it sometimes looks like you're in a ring with this giant wrestler and you're going to get whooped. Giant wrestler, that's the problem. That's the conflict. That's the obstacle. And then comes the negative emotion. And when that negative emotion comes, it sometimes can grip people so much so that they feel completely controlled by the situation. And like they're in jail, they can't get out. And so it's very, the negative emotion, whoever you are, whatever you are, can be very disempowering. Whatever your capacities are, suddenly they vanish, and everything gets directed, funneled, channeled towards the obstacle, the problem, and fixing the problem. There are people that make their career based on helping people that are stuck like that. Here's one, Dorothy Rowe. One of her statements is, depression is a prison where you are both a suffering prisoner and a cruel jailer. Meaning, you have the key to get yourself out of jail. But you don't get yourself out of jail, you stay in jail. You're the suffering prisoner of the circumstance. You don't have to be. You have the key to get yourself out. That's what one of her field was, to help people find a way that they don't have to be the prisoner. Here's a little example. Nelson Mandela. You're all familiar with Nelson Mandela. You know who's Nelson Mandela? You've heard his name. Okay. So, for years, something like, let's see if it says in the text here, 27 years. He was like Mahatma Gandhi. He was a martyr. He was an example of during the apartheid period in South Africa, and he stood for freedom. But he wasn't a violent stand for freedom person. He was a nonviolent stand for freedom person. And so they made an example of him and put him in jail. They put him in jail. The prison that he was in was an island off the coast of South Africa. For 27 years, what he did every day was they let him out of the jail cell. They took him he and 3 other prisoners, by the sea. They had rocks and a hammer, and they smashed the rocks until it became powder. At the end of the day, they threw the powder in the sea. Next day, humiliating. Break their pride, break their willpower. And he survived. And that little story, one of the prisoners had with him a copy of Bhagavad Gita. And then he fell also. I don't know what he did to end up in that prison. And they read Bhagavad Gita together. And for reading Bhagavad Gita together, one of the things he did, it gave him strength. And, a center on higher consciousness, as opposed to the problem that there's nothing you can do about. Sometimes there's circumstances of life that you really can't do anything about it. That was one. So here's his statement. As I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. So your mind can be the jail or the prison. And you hold on to those negative emotions, it keeps you in jail. Even physically, in this case, you would know it's freedom 27 years later. And circumstances touch the life of everybody because there's always unexpected circumstances that arise. You can have a plan for what you expect, and then something else is going to happen. And it can be pleasant or it can be unpleasant. So that's how you respond to that pleasant, unpleasant. The negative emotions, here's some little images. We'll have some names that were shown. It happens to all of us. Helplessness, loneliness. Here's something that may be a surprise to you, maybe not. In the UK, there's such a crisis about loneliness, they made a ministry of loneliness. Because the government found they spent so much money dealing with loneliness that it was better to be proactive and have a ministry of loneliness. It's, I don't know, yet any of you are of the age when you can remember the Beatles song. It's one of their celebrated Beatles songs. Where have all the lonely people come from? Where do they belong? Boom, 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 boom. No, it's not a new thing. It's a problem. When people feel lonely, I know some people that are feeling lonely. I know some people that are getting support even when they're feeling lonely. And when they're getting support, they respect the support. Some people, even when they get this, anyway, they're stuck in loneliness. Anger. Maybe you know somebody that has that problem. Who knows what triggers? And then something triggers. It may not have anything to do with the situation, but something triggers. And a lot of it has to do with stuff from the past. We'll hear some more about it. Or self-sabotage. I know some people like this too. If there isn't a problem, they create one. They go out on a branch and start sawing the branch, so they hear the branch start to crack, and then they panic because they get the rush from panic, and then they rush for the trunk of the tree. Then they do it again, they do it again, they do it again. It's just patterns are sometimes they repeat. Anxiety. This is a big one. Blame. And you resent some misfortune that came to you, and the blame, you don't take responsibility for it. It's somebody else's fault, because. And then you give the because. For those of you that like Bhagavad Gita, I encourage you to read Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, text 22, and Krishna dismisses the blame game, because he says in the verse, is paraphrasing this Sanskrit to the verse, but we're responsible for the good fortune, ill fortune that comes our way. Sadasad yoni janmaso. Purusha prakriti stohi bhumte jan gunan karanam gunasambosya sadasad janma jonasyu. 13:22 Bhagavad Gita. We are the architects of our good fortune, ill fortune. And there's something back there was done that caused misfortune today. And I can blame somebody else. You're the cause of my misfortune today. We're the architect of our misfortune. It's karma, the principle of karma. I'm gonna vent a little bit. We drove from a suburb of Chicago, a place called Naperville, to come here. And miles of cornfield, soy field, and hay field. For what? You know what for? For the media industry. And they could grow other stuff, but that's what they grow because there's money. And money for what? Well, griping. So the country in which we live, the world in which we live, the tongue rules. Not ethics rule or values rule, but the tongue. So the tongue says, I want, and so people do, and they're responsible. And when calamity comes for people to do, to bring misfortune upon others, why is this happening to me or to us? Or, why is there so much violence in the world today? Because there's violence in the world today. And it's where the architects of that misfortune. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. So here's a chart. Meditation raises consciousness. So there's low consciousness and there's higher consciousness. And then there's emotions on the left side, shame and guilt, they're really way down there. Fear is lighter than shame and guilt. Anger is lighter than fear. And then towards the middle here, there's willingness and reason. Then there's higher emotions, and then there's enlightenment. That's very, very top. Moksha, or nirvana, or different terminology from the Vedic texts describing this one. Going up on this in general, there's love, interesting. Higher than love is gratitude, and higher than gratitude is this enlightenment. So on the right side is just saying there's darker, there's more light, and there's intense light. This is the findings based upon a book of consciousness. That I know some of you may also know in the field of science, not just in the field of philosophy, there's a fair amount of study these days in consciousness studies from a science perspective. What is it, and how do you measure it, and all of those kinds of things. If you're interested, I'll point you in the direction of the group of people that hold conferences on this topic. They bring in astrophysicists and scholars from Oxford University and people that discuss these topics and write papers on it and so forth. There's a group in Gainesville, Florida, that place where the University of Florida is, and it's called the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies. They have an acronym just like NIU. The IAS, the BMS, BMC, Bhakti Meditation Club. Everything has an acronym. They have theirs. And it's one of the many things they do. The very highly learned people studying things that highly learned people these days are studying, and they bring those people together and hold a conference on topics like that. It's a nice place. Refreshing. Consciousness studies. So we all have experience of the positive emotions. You should look at the darker ones, and here's the lighter ones. Kindness. We all have experience of when you go out of your way to do an act of kindness for someone, you feel something. It's not an expectation, it just happens. It's a good feeling. Or when there's honesty, sometimes it's embarrassing, but when someone is very honest with themselves and then in turn with others, at least certain people who they invite into their circle of sharing with honesty, there's a certain feeling that person feels that they're to be honest. It's a mode of goodness characteristic from Bhagavad Gita. Mode of goodness. It's a character of goodness. Or service to others. There's a certain feeling that goes along with that. Or forgiveness. Somebody did something that was hurtful, and you forgive them. You can hold on to it, then you're in jail. Nelson Mandela's point. You can hold on to it. That's your choice. Or you can let go. Doesn't mean that the behavior or speech is just fine, but you can forgive them. It's an option. It's a freedom option. Or joy. Or peace. Now, there's a couple of little segments that requires you to interact with each other. This is one of them. I'm going to ask you to participate. 3, 4 people, if it's fine, you can have whoever, however. There's an intention behind what we do. That's an important thing to know. So the question I want you to discuss with another person or a few. Why are you here? Go to the why question. Like, why are you at this university? There's a common answer, and there's maybe a thoughtful answer that's beyond the common answer. And when it comes to negative emotions, are there some that you regularly experience? They repeat and repeat, repeat. And there's some positive ones that you wish to access. So that's part of what I'd like you to spend the next few minutes, 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Let's see how it goes. Questions on what the topic is? You know what the topic is. On the screen, it's going to stay on there. And you mark it set. Go. Gentlemen, please participate. There's trouble right behind you.
So not feeling like what I was feeling when I started any such a thing. So I feel like that's fine. Second, I think that both of them. It's get another mental
In many audiences, the facilitator knows it's time to end when people look up. And now it's when people get their phones out. That's a signal it's time to move on. We're going to move on. Where do negative emotions come from? It's a very simple explanation. You see a fellow sitting at a desk and there's a computer in front of him and a screen. So, physical, mental, and spiritual, just like a computer. Hardware, software, and user. So, negative emotions, which of these three? There's a combination of these three. Now, let's go to the hardware part. In our modern society, is there a shortage of hardware? Modern life is replete with facilities. Anywhere, you mean, it's not, there are some places that are less, but there's plenty of places where there's abundance. Places where there's abundance doesn't mean those people don't have negative emotions. They need more hardware improvement. That's not what the need is. You have more comforts and more conveniences than ever before. But modern life has led to a serious condition. I mean, I said at the beginning. It's one of the topics favorite topic amongst college students, because I like visiting colleges, and that's a topic that's on their mind. Here's a little chart. This is the CDC. You all know what that is. When during the pandemic, those people were guiding everything. That's those people. So, mental disorders in the USA, going from 1968, and then go over here to 2010, something happened. It's not that in the course of between 1968 and today, there's insufficient material facilities. But the mental, this is like, clinical mental disorder, CDC kind of mental disorder. It's very serious stuff. So just like, the coronavirus, so they asked the question, people that study this. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness. Anxiety disorders, we saw this list of things at the very, very beginning. Anxiety disorders, most common mental illness in the U.S. 40 million adults. That's almost 20% of the population each year. The new statistic each year, how many people have clinical anxiety disorder? 300 million people, this is the World Health Organization. 300 million people say depression per year. In China, they don't like to advertise they have a problem. They have problems. Employees at 50 of China's topmost companies, 30 cities, almost 80% surveyed showed signs of agitation. It's wrong. So, and reporting anxiety, and 38% haunted by depression. I don't know how they let that statistic out, but haunted by depression. Other statistics, 16.2 million adults in the U.S. have experienced a major depressive episode in the past year. That's a big number. 15% of the adult population will experience at some point in time, the major, the clinical depression. 3.2 million adolescents in the United States had at least one major depressive episode. The number is greater for girls. Total economic burden, $210 billion per year. Well, I'm tempted to say, let Donald Trump figure that one out. Who's he going to attack? So that's the incidence, the commonness of it, and how does it get triggered? And then those people that work with this profession have expressed there's something outside and something inside. And a big one is from our past experience. Here's a couple of examples. Antakarana. Those of you that aren't from India, you may not know what those terms are. Karana is causation. Anta means within. So cause within. A cause within is a traumatic experience of something from the past. And then you see something and it triggers that trauma from the past. May have nothing to do with the current situation. So here's a fellow standing at it's a hot summer day, and he goes to the lake and go for a swim, and all of a sudden he gets gripped with some anxiety or some fear or some negative emotion. Having to do with the fact that perhaps in this life or the previous life, he was involved in a near drowning or a drowning experience. And just standing by water, and there's some emotion inside that's captured his attention. The parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. Not reasoned, it's just, a past experience. I had one of those. I'll share with you one of those. I grew up in a family of 5 children. Older brother, 3 sisters, and then little me. And my brother told me later, from the very day that I came home from the hospital, we shared the same room with 2 boys and 3 girls over there. And boys will be boys, So we would sometimes wrestle. Guess who won? And the sign when the wrestling was over is my brother put a pillow over my head. So I had no memory of any of that. He told me later. Because what happened later is I'm now at my senior year in high school, we did what kids in America do. We went to this place, that place. One of the places we went to was a fort. Fort Ticonderoga, overseeing, a landmark place. You could see this river and that river, and they had a fort there. And in the fort, one of the things, an old fort, they had a prison. So we're kids and we're going through the whole Fort Ticonderoga. And we found this prison. So I, here as a kid, I went in first. And then got stuffed in the back. And then all of a sudden, reason left. And I just had to get out. I didn't scream. I pushed. And I got out. And then came the question, where did that come from? And then later my brother told me, this is where it came from. From the karana, the cause within. An emotion that's in the moment that was triggered by something that's from the past. Had nothing to do with the moment. Something to do, but not to the state of the parasympathetic and nervous system completely controlled my whole being, and I had to da. And that happens. So life is, we go along in our life, looks a little complicated sometimes, but we keep moving, and we run into stuff like this. Here's a little example. Oh no, an explanation first. Here's a fellow looking at a TV screen. Now, here's a TV screen. The TV screen is blank. There are images that are showing on the TV screen, and we're the observer of the image that's on the screen. The mind is compared like that. One of the practices of meditation I did when I was learning a little bit about meditation. I was an undergraduate student in the university where I was attending, and we were near a Zen ashram. Not near, but not far away. So one of the persons in the house, they got into it, Zen Buddhism. So we set up in our, at our place, an off-campus residence facility, a little Zendo. They call it ashram. So what you do in the Zendo, what Zen Buddhists do, is you sit and you purposely don't interact with the thoughts in your mind. So here we are, young kids, sitting in a blank wall. It was a white, completely white wall, sitting in a lotus posture, practicing zazen. And the discipline goes, you're sitting there, and in the mind, here comes a thought. Now, normally what people do is they involve themselves with their thoughts. But Zen teaches, don't interact with thoughts, just observe them. Like you might observe a cloud in the sky. Here comes a cloud in the sky. You don't interact with it. It's gone. And here comes another one. There's distractions. Here comes another one. But commonly, people not only interact with the thoughts in their mind, but it becomes their life. They build their life around the thoughts in their mind. The thoughts in their mind have everything to do with your past impressions, your relationships and good fun, good times, bad times, and stuff. And that's your life. And eventually, the discipline says, and it works, eventually the sky becomes clear. Thoughts just simmer down, and it becomes very peaceful. Thoughtlessness. kind of peacefulness. And then we finished and it went on to do our next thing, the mind gets all cluttered up again. So I came to the realization it's artificial. It's powerful. That type of meditation is powerful. But it's artificial because we do stuff. When you do stuff, your mind gets cluttered because that's what you do. If you're just doing stuff and you don't have a higher kind of discipline of meditation. So this is what happens when people have negative emotions. Something appears in the mind and they fix on that something. It's just a screen. And you're the observer of the screen. And then some image appears in the screen called the mind. And then you'll have a feeling about that something. It's right in Bhagavad Gita. By contemplation, this is a verse from Bhagavad Gita, by contemplation of objects of senses, the mind is contemplating the screen. One develops an attachment for them, what you're contemplating upon. From attachment comes some emotion. From emotion becomes action. And that's your life. So it's the TV screen. And it's the whole cinematographics. They have a horror scene or they have an action, they call it action scenes. Or, romance scene or something scene. And the audience likes it because they have some experience, some emotion from seeing this thing on the screen. It has nothing to do with them. It's just the scene on the screen. But people like it. They pay money to sit there and watch the screen. And that's, it's happiness. And then the happiness means unhappiness. That's the satisfaction. The inner screen is often not transparent to the outer reality. Circumstances can be disproportionate to or completely different from external perception. Here's the example. This is a lady that works in a 1-800 suicide hotline. She got a call one day from a young girl, and the girl said she was contemplating suicide. Why? What happened? My boyfriend didn't answer the phone. Really? Because you're not supposed to say, oh, come on, you're supposed to empathize with the person. So she's a trained suicide, guiding person. So she put two and two together, and something happened in her childhood that triggered that emotion. So when she found out about it, her inner impression was that when she was growing up, she was from a broken family. And mom and dad were arguing and they split. She was left alone. A lonely girl in her room feeling lonely. She was well acquainted with the loneliness feeling, and then when her boyfriend didn't answer the phone, it triggered that emotion. It had nothing to do with the reality of the situation. It had to do everything with what she had been through. And that can trigger suicide, or at least negative emotion, extreme negative emotion. Okay, here's another exercise. Ready? Has there been a time in the past where you have reacted to a situation that was either disproportionate to or completely different from reality, or it's reversed? Someone else completely misread your interaction or intention. You do something that's meant for kindness to somebody else, and they read the opposite. Why did you do that to me? Or they may not say it, just like vibe you or something. Did come again? And then, you have to explain yourself, but it's still, it happens. So this is a little discussion. Debrief for the partner. Short, we won't go long with this one. Mark its head. So.
Yes.
Will be really quick. You want you guys want food experience.
Okay. I think you got the picture. Because I'm looking at the clock and we're almost at 1 hour. We started on time. This is now what's called the avalanche effect. One of the places I visited not too long ago was Alaska. And something I learned when I visited Alaska is about avalanches and mountain climbing. So I learned from the people that do mountain climbing in Alaska how avalanches start and how they try to avoid it. So avalanche comes when there's packed snow, and then there's a light snow on top of the packed snow. And a little bit of snow at the top starts to tumble down, and the other light snow gathers and gathers and gathers and gathers and gets to the bottom. It deadly. The avalanche can kill you. It gets covered. You're finished. So what they do is they have these rubber bullets. They fire the rubber bullet towards the upper region of the mountain and see what happens. If nothing happens, it's safe to climb the mountain. So the avalanche effect is very serious business. And here's Bhagavad Gita describing the avalanche effect. Contemplate the object of the senses. Remember that screen. Contemplate. You see something, you meditate on that something. And what happens commonly is there's some feeling connected with the something that you just meditated upon, felt some attachment for. And then the emotion can become an obsession. Like, I gotta get one, or I gotta get rid of it, or, positive, negative. And then it can lead to destructive action. Not necessarily suicide, but something hurtful to yourself or to others or both. So one of the teachings, now we're going to go to, that was the problem, here's the solution, or something that can help. So detachment, well, Bhagavad Gita fans, you understand vairagya, the principle of when you know that you're different than the scene, the object, and what you're contemplating, just like the mirror. There's the mind, and then there's the observer of the mind. So identify with the mind, please. Excuse me, identify with the self, the observer, not the mirror and the mind. And then higher than the mind is the intelligence. The intelligence can direct the mind. When this negative emotion thing happens in the mind, it's possible to redirect it. Here's a very simple practical example. For me, it's really easy. It's also for you easy. Supposing there's a spill, and there's some place you don't want that water to go to, So you just make a line where the water is flowing over that way, and it'll go that way. Instead of making something wet that you don't want to become wet. Redirect that flow of that water that's spilling. Continues to spill. Redirect it. And you can do that with the mind also. So here's the Bhagavad Gita verse. The senses are so strong and impetuous, Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination, who was endeavoring to control them. So it doesn't always work just by having a strong intelligence, you redirect the mind. So the alternative, or in addition to that capacity of intelligence, is there has to be purity. What does purity mean? Check it out. Hear the sound. It's soft. Okay. So the teenager did this one for me. Prahlad Shringa did this for me. I asked him, we put it, grab it, can you make 3 sets of doors? So you're like, in Jaipur or someplace where they have doors, and inside the doors an altar, and inside the altar, so 3 sets of doors. As acting from the platform of the soul, yeah. Physical body, the sound sound, but physical body, the mind, our dear friend, and then the heart, or the place where consciousness acts most warmly and feelingly. And then on the other side of that set of doors is who you really are. Okay, so that's higher consciousness message. They're speaking to us, our guest that's not so familiar with Bhagavad Gita. That's the concept, the higher consciousness, the wisdom literature that takes you to a higher consciousness. And that higher consciousness can release you from the oppressiveness of negative emotions. It's overcoming the obstacle of negative emotions when you have this process of mantra meditation. Just like that example of Kundi. I mean, I don't know what their meditation was. I don't know what they were teaching, technique. But some technique that brings the mind away from stuff and towards something else. There's methodologies. I've mentioned one, this Zazen methodology. But there's many. Meditation, candle, meditation, or mandala, meditation on sound. My guess is that's what this is. Yeah? It's 7 o'clock, but I'm going to share a little story anyways. And I want to end. And at the end we'll have some discussion. But once upon a time, I was an invited guest at Harvard University religious school, the Department of Religion. And one of their grad students had made a documentary about higher consciousness from different traditions, this tradition, that tradition. And one segment was a Buddhist, nice soft music, and he's rowing and paddling a canoe this way, that way. He pulled the canoe reached the edge of the shore. He pulled the canoe up, and he looked up, and there was a Buddhist monk. And the Buddhist monk did one of these. They had a big bowl. Boom. That's one type of meditation. One of the things that they do in meditation centers is they use that method. Sound. Sound is very effective. So at the end, each of us were asked to comment on, it was a sample. Somebody was endeavoring to do something for their graduate study. So my comment was the most effective thing for me when viewing this was sound. The techniques that are connected to sound the most effective way in spiritual life to come to the soul platform and not just the body and mind and stuff. The object of the senses is sound, and spiritual sound is more effective than brass bowl. Brass bowl is effective, but when the ringing stops, then what? When the emptiness of the mind in zazen stops, then what? So what's on the other side of doing something temporary through sound? Because sound connects with spiritual sound, connects with spirit soul. And that's what mantra meditation is. We're almost done. That's the topic, path purity. Elevate through sacred sound meditation. Get in touch with your soul. Doesn't work just by thinking about it. It's a state of being. There's a verse from this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the graduate study of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Simply by giving oral reception to Vedic sounds, the feeling for loving devotional service, that's bhakti, sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. That's the conclusion of our presentation. Here's a fellow, a little bit more, Dr. Hans Jenny from Switzerland was a scientist. And he built a machine that tested. He called it a tonoscope. Something that generated sound, a tube that directed that sound to some medium, and then there's the medium. And on the medium he put powder. He didn't touch the powder, just the sound did. And then when the sound hit the medium, it made different patterns, geometric patterns, mandala. And when he directed the Om sound, that's what he got. That was the powder bounced around and formed the Om symbol. From Vedic culture, here it is. Maybe you recognize it. It works. Well, where did this come from in yogis in India? It's from sound formation, based this geometric pattern. There is a picture of what Hans Jenny found. Okay. Feel the vibration. That's the very basic principle of Vedas or Vedic wisdom or wisdom literature. It's based on sound. And then spiritual sound has a spiritualizing effect. And with spiritualizing effect awakens the soul and relieves one of antakarana or past impressions or other things, even current impressions. You can still have a current impression, but you don't have to identify with it. Especially if you're identifying with and have awakened sense of who you really are. But that's our topic. Look at that, within 1 hour's time. It's a nice story in between. So let's see if there's some discussion, comments, or questions. From experience, the first question is the one that's a little more troublesome. Then once that's done, the others. Be patient. Yes.
Couple of questions.
Okay, go ahead.
You thought see answers from me. In the process of achieving something which we desire, if there are challenges and negative emotions,
Yes.
so how do I look at that? Do I see that is trying to convey that I have to try some other way, or do I have to give it up? Because I've been failing multiple times in achieving that.
It depends. No, that's a quick answer. So, if it's from your question, it sounds like something repeats itself. So, when something that repeats itself, you can't just, not a good idea just to ignore it, and it'll go away because it's likely to repeat itself. So, a simple standard, three things. Step back. So go into reflective space, mode of goodness. What's going on? Reflect. Introspect. What's going on inside, what's going on out there. And so you're not involving, by that stepping back, you're detaching yourself from the event and the emotion connected to the event. And you're becoming more towards the intelligence and assessing or analyzing and looking within. What is this? Not how do we get rid of it or how to get more of it, but what is it? And so in that reflection, more likely your intelligence is broader, because if your intelligence is like that of an animal, it's narrower. And you're just dealing with it, it feels good, get it. It feels bad, get away from it. Or, kill it, or, something. So, your freedom is established by reflective, by mode of goodness. Intelligence becomes broader, more freedom. So that's one thing to do, and so it depends on what's going on. Sometimes if you're in a car and the car's heading towards you, you have to do something quickly. You have to be quick. So, but if the emotion of the situation doesn't have to be controlling you, if you're in a reflective mode. Second, if you're practiced at some type of sound meditation, then you have ballast. You have a reserve strength that can carry you through the emotion of the circumstance, and then also give greater strength to your spiritual intelligence, how to navigate your life through bumps of the road and through misfortune, especially ones that repeat. That's the what's going on question. And then the third is, in some cases, after your intelligence tells you to, let's say it's a medical. I know some people with chronic medical. So, you do what you need to do on the medical side. But supposing it continues, and it continues, and then it's not that one, it's something else, and then it's something else. And then comes, that's when you do the best you can, but you become accepting of the circumstance because it has to do with something back there. Not this deed back there, and now I'm in this circumstance, and I just accept this deed that's back there. Do you have Srimad Bhagavatam access to it? Yeah. Write it down or put it in your phone or something. Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 13, text number 8. 10, 13, 8. No, 10, 14, 8. This is Lord Brahma had difficulty. And then he realized that difficulty has to do with my past misdeeds. So it's a teaching that says, when something comes from my past misdeeds, I just accept it. I may, take some proper action appropriate for the service, yes. But the misdeed may continue, it's repeating itself. I just accept it. And then that's the acceptance part. Then what? Let my mind not budge an inch from the ultimate objective of my life, the supreme objective of my life. Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, the supreme objective of my life. That's what's most important to me. So the temporary, I accept it, deal with it, and it keeps coming, keeps coming. Let me not forget the ultimate purpose of my life. If you don't have that, this is this why question. You don't have a clear sense of why. The circumstances can evolve easily. So hit the reset button on what the purpose is. It'll save you a lot of trouble, a lot of mental trouble at least. Maybe not circumstantial trouble, but the mental trouble. Anything else? Yes.
We're talking about negative emotions.
Yeah, that's the topic.
There are people who are self-conscious
Yeah,
and they self-deprecate.
yes,
And then there's another thing called humility.
yeah.
How do these emotions contradict each other or juxtapose?
Well, humility doesn't mean, I think, badly about myself. It's not low self-esteem. That's not what humility is. That's another mental state that's in the materials field. Real humility, keeping it very simple, is to know who you are. And when you know who you are, stuff doesn't affect you. It can be this, light or dark. Doesn't matter. And you can see what it is, but it doesn't affect you because you know who you are. Say negative, it's the opposite. If you don't know who you are, then circumstances of life can beat you up. And even, all kinds of things can do that. Not just the negative emotion things, it's things. Supposing, they could go the other direction, supposing you become the valedictorian of your graduating class, and you get all these praise and awards and stuff, you think, I'm at the top of the totem pole. And then something happens, and you're not at the top of the totem pole anymore. It was a mistaken or illusory sense of relation. It's not, so, and that leads to another negative emotion that it was supposed to be this, and now it's that. So, and that's the world we live in, a place of duality. By the way, our friend who doesn't know about the Gita, or maybe she'll back it. So, in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about duality. Matra sparshas konteya sitoshna sukha dukkha agama payo nityastam sadiksha sapartas. Krishna says, there's duality in this place. Sometimes sukha, sometimes dukkha. Sometimes winter season, sometimes summer season. Sometimes honor, sometimes dishonor. It's just the nature of the place. So what to do about the nature of the place? So if you know who you are, you can see sometimes and sometimes. You know when it's winter, you know when it's summer. You dress accordingly and conduct yourself accordingly because you can see what's what. But you don't identify with the duality if you know who you are. If you don't know who you are, you're not humble. There's a statement of who you are. You're very tiny in the midst of circumstances that are not under our control. Very tiny. But I'm the tiny servant of the Supreme who is in control. Let me just serve the Supreme. Keep that who am I connection very strong. That's humble. Is that okay?
Perfectly answers my question.
Yeah, it's simple. I mean, from the spiritual perspective, it's simple. To achieve that, it's purification. It's letting go of the misidentification and growing, cultivating spiritual reality, self-realization. And that self-realized person is humble. They can also speak strongly or act strongly or be a king or, something. But, from a spiritual perspective. Give protection, give what they give from the place of serving the Supreme. Like Arjuna. And, any Maharaj Ambarish or Yudhisthira or something, some big person can be very strong. Okay.
Yeah, the last second question.
Sure.
Speaking of the negative emotions, when you come across persons who are
Hurtful.
yeah,
Hurtful people.
hurtful people, yeah. So how do we look at them? How do we treat them? Do we just
It depends. That I guess a quick answer. You can know, at least from the position of knowledge, you can understand that person is suffering. And because they're suffering, they don't want to acknowledge their suffering. And so their behavior is hurtful. Because it makes them feel better to be hurtful, because now, I'm in a power position instead of a victim position. They're suffering. That's why they're being hurtful. Now, that's how you perceive, then what do? Depends on what they're up to. You just respect them from a distance. That's one thing you can do. I don't really want to get involved with this hurtful person. But I don't want to disrespect them. I just keep a respectful distance from that hurtful person. And keep close association with wholesome people. And, they know who I am. Well, I'm doing either one. I'm not it's not just protection to be away from the hurtful person. It's just, if there was some service that I could do for this particular person, let me think what service I can do. Not protect myself against the hurtful person, but what service can I do? Maybe whatever. Maybe there is something I can do. Smile, or something, or something. But at least the desire to be in service to even the person who is the hurtful person, because they're suffering inside. And I wouldn't want to be suffering inside. I'd probably do things that hurt other people without even knowing I'm hurting other people too. What would I like? So do what you would like done to you. This is called the golden rule. You do to others what you would like them. So do something. Even when they're not even paying attention, you do some kindness or something of benefit to them. Somehow. A little something that shows what's in your heart, as opposed to like this Nelson Mandela statement. Aside from his own negative emotion, one of the things that he did when he went back to South Africa is he became a very staunch advocate of Bhagavad Gita. Because it protected him. It lifted him in a very dire situation. And he went here and there along with whatever else he was doing. He gave a lot of credit to Bhagavad Gita and the message of Bhagavad Gita. People took interest in it, so that was beneficial even to the people who were harming him. Took interest in Bhagavad Gita. Wow, all the strength from this fellow that we dealt with so badly, and he's still strong. Where did he get his strength from? Okay, we're done. So, okay. Now, I have some little plate of Mahaprasadam here from the Chicago temple. There's deities of Kishore, and they provided me with some Kishore Mahaprasad. So if you don't mind, I'm going to walk around and give some out.
Just before that, thank you so much for the talk today.
Okay.
And I think it's very rare that we get opportunities where people open our perspective to the world inside and the world outside. And I think you've really done that for all of us today. And also very grateful to the AARC, the Asian American Resource Center, for hosting us every week without fail. Michelle, who you just saw go in, she is a huge part of this. Her and Christina. Also, we're the Bhakti Meditation Club, and we meet here every Thursday. We have talks like this sometimes. We have meditation, we have yoga, and we also have a discussion about various topics related to mental health. And we would love to see everybody come here every week. It's a small effort that we do to build an Indian community, and we would really appreciate everybody to, we would not appreciate, but we would like to welcome everybody to this space. Thank you so much.
What was, I didn't catch her name, but I heard about her from.
Dr. Michelle Bringas. She will be right back, but she would like to meet with you.
Okay. I heard good things about this next meeting. Okay, so here's the